can. So what's the title of this session again, Allison? Open discussion.
Sure. The title is Open Discussion: Web Communications in the Time of COVID-19.
Yes, it's a very complex time. In the last 3 to 4 weeks, things have really been ramping up. Obviously, this has been going on for a little longer than that, but I think it's really affected all of us more dramatically over the last month. We've been working from home since pretty much March 8th or something like that. And from then on, I came back from vacation and we've been working on this maybe 50% of our time, some of us on the team, just different pieces of it. So I'm David Tom. I'm the manager of UX and design at Stanford Web Services. My co-hosts, why don't you say hello?
Hi, I'm Dina DeBry with Stanford Web Services, and we sort of submitted this session, as you might imagine, a little bit last minute because we've been in a number of conversations, both within the university and with peer institutions, about how this changes what we're doing and how it might be changing what we're doing going forward. So we thought it would be interesting to have sort of an open discussion and maybe hear more about what some of the emerging needs are as we see our lives going increasingly online and our websites maybe being used for things that they are not typically used for. So that's sort of what I'm most interested in hearing about today. And I'll pass it to Allison.
Hi, my name is Allison Ho, and I'm a web project manager at Web Services. And Dina and I are actually chatting about all of the COVID-19 work that our team was doing, and then we thought, like, maybe we have some thoughts and feelings about this as a web team here. And so I pulled actually a few stats from our team, since we do track our time in this program called Harvest. And since March 1st and as of yesterday, our team has spent about 165 hours on COVID-19 related tasks. And I was thinking, like, wow, that's really impacted our team. And out of that, of those people, we have 20 people on our team and 16 people have logged to that. So it's really affected all of us in it. And Dina has also been doing some work too with a web audit on where COVID-19 has been mentioned, or if there's like a page. And as of yesterday, she has found at least 127 pages, but that number seems to be growing, and 127 pages on Stanford communication, not like other outside of Stanford.
Not news.
Not news, yeah. So we thought this might be something that we might want to chat about since we are in the web space. So David, do you want to talk a little about the research that you've been doing?
Sure. We've been working with our friends in University Communications and University IT Communications to support our primary site that is our primary hub site called healthalerts.stanford.edu, and that site had been around for a while and suddenly had a lot of traffic going to it as it became the primary place where we were delivering news and updates around all the status changes that were happening. As you can imagine, we went from classes are, remote to campuses remote in about a week's time. So there was a lot of big changes happening, a lot of status changes happening. So we did our part of this. The University IT Communications stood up the Teach Anywhere site. University Communications has been running the Health Alerts website and making sure that that's going well. We did a quick usability session with them to try and improve the overall page layout to make it a little bit more accessible for folks, a little more usable. And we also did some very quick user testing And in that testing, it was very interesting to find how people were using it. The questions we asked were, the testing we did was focused on students. So we were able to get a couple of non-Stanford students to go through it, but they had just gone through the same thing with their schools. So the questions we were asked is, what would you do on the web to figure out what you need to do to go home, to get off campus? What would you do to figure out what you need to do to finish the quarter? Final assignments, finals, that kind of fun stuff. What would you do to figure out what you need to do for the next quarter? And lastly, what would you do to make sure that you're going to end up still eligible to graduate? That's kind of focused on, obviously, the seniors or people who are ready to move out and be done. A lot of graduation requirements there. So we really found some interesting stuff. And one was because we were because Stanford's producing so much content on the overall COVID-19 and coronavirus situation, it was hard for students to find the Health Alert site using organic search, because there just was a fair amount of noise. We also found that once they were on the sites, because we were using an FAQ format, in-site search was challenging. Additionally, we found that because the site title and focus is health alerts, students expected to find a certain amount of information there, but then expected more specific information to come from the primary sources of that type of information. So housing information from housing. How do I get out of my dorm? What are the details with that? Class information for existing classes, either directly from the instructor or from our learning management system, Canvas. And kind of like that, what's going to happen with the semester type of information to come from their departments. So helping them manage all those different sources has been a bit of a challenge when the Health Alert site is primarily focused on news and updates of current status. So we added some links to the pages. We're in a process right now to implement some changes based on what we learned. So that's what's happening, some of the stuff that we've been doing. Allison, do we have that slide deck?
So I think we mostly want to start hearing from you about what are some of the things you've done so far. Let's see here, Allison, can you see if people are raising their hands? I'm not sure. I haven't done this moderation very much. Maybe I can see that. But if you have things, we're interested in things people have done so far that they feel have been successful. Then we'd like to hear a little bit more about what you think you're planning on doing or what you might need. So let's see here. If anyone would like to share. Oh, I see.
I will. I'll hop in. I'll just say that I've been working with some of the institutes, and because the nature of this whole thing, they have so much media mentions and news articles from people who are in the institutes. So having a way to collect that and showing that in a single page or something like that is something that they really want to do. So for instance, the CPR website put a big banner on their homepage, and when I say big, it's big. It's like this huge, ginormous coronavirus thing, which links to a page that shows all the various media mentions of people in the institute. That's kind of cool. And it's going to grow, I'm sure.
Any other things folks have done so far? I know that we have also put a ton of banners on a lot of our the sites that we manage that point to the health alert site.
Checking raised hands, so I'm seeing Rachel, then Sarah, then Sean, then Tori.
Chaz.
Hi.
Let's go with Rachel first.
Oh, sorry. So I mean, I'm in physics right now, so we haven't really had a lot to do with a lot of the direct messaging. We have basically just redirected people to you guys' site. So that's pretty much the extent of what we've been doing, and just kind of reacting to the situation as it presents itself based on external guidance.
Thank you. I think Sarah Seastone, you're next.
So I'm in the libraries, and I think for us, very quickly, it was sort of a discussion of banners. And how do you get banners? How do you get them across all the web properties that are disparate in some ways, you know? How do you get the banner text to make sense for that particular space and that page? So how do you sort of stack or reword text different on an hours page than you would on your front property, different from, you know, so how do you make that text be really interesting and useful in that space? And then how to spin quickly up a page that makes sense in the moment, but also doesn't completely negate or confuse where you've got information, that same information in an existing page. So for example, we have a lot of information about resources, but it assumes a print space and a physical space for access to those resources. So we had to spin up kind of a remote access page, but we're being really careful that that information complements what the other existing standing pages say. You know, so it's been a lot more work than I would have anticipated maybe on the outset.
Thank you. I think I have Sean DeArmond next in raising hands, and then I've got Tori and Chaz in the queue.
Cool, I can't unmute myself. Hi guys. So I wanted to, you know, I'm not at Stanford, obviously, I'm at UC Davis, but so we spun up a similar site, keepteaching.ucdavis.edu, and I think it's funny how these names, we probably spent about as much time thinking about the name as we did, about 10 minutes maybe. So I think it's sort of cool how the domain names come up with like the goal, right? To keep teaching or teach anywhere. I just think that's really cool. So one of the things that we found is that all these interesting little problems started showing up, obviously, right? When people need to teach anywhere, you know, people need to teach from home. And one of the things we were able to do on our Keep Teaching site, which is, you know, Drupal 8, of course, is build a little tool that does a little thing that can save, you know, exponential amount of time across the entire university. So in this one example, we used the web form module on Drupal 8, which, if you don't know, has a post handler, which means it can post to a web post, an external website or an external web API. And so we were able to, when the request came in, we had a problem with some courses on Canvas couldn't connect to the right Zoom account that the faculty member had associated with themselves. It was whatever weird thing. So a simple web form site with a remote post to a AWS API gateway with a Lambda function that just fired off that one little thing, and now faculty can associate their course with you know, associate their course with their Zoom account, and so they can teach. So little things like this that we need to think of when people come to us with questions, I think are really important. You know, we're gonna, you know, think of quick little things to do that'll really make just huge improvements over, you know, you have hundreds of classes, thousands of professors teaching, and little things that we can do that just make huge differences. So go forth and do that. I think this is so cool that we're all focused on this. That's all.
Thank you, Sean. I think that Tori was next, and then Chaz, and then James just recently raised his hand as well. So Tori, on to you.
Hey, so I've been working with student affairs, and we have 30 plus sites. So we started with banners, basically directing everyone to health alerts. That was sort of the first reaction to the crises. And then for some of those sites, we've had to create custom homepages. For instance, Vaden and Bechtel, big sites that everyone's going to. So creating custom homepages for there. And then now we're sort of in the space where we're able to do a little bit more forward thinking and think about, resources for well-being from home and all of those great things. And that's an evolving process. But one thing I found really exciting is people that haven't looked at their websites in probably 5 years are now getting a lot of excitement about revisiting the content. And now that they know everyone's only accessing them virtually, really excited about what their websites can do. So I do think while we were in sort of reactionary mode, I think it's nice to be able to transition into some of that more proactive work.
We're definitely seeing that too, Tori.
Great, thank you, Tori. I'm gonna skip the queue here and go to James because it looks like Chaz is on the phone and perhaps otherwise engaged. So James Smith, go ahead. I think you had your hand raised.
Yes, is this, can you hear me?
We can.
Good, thanks. Yeah, this is a little Twilight Zone-ish in that I submitted a presentation proposal that was accepted. Thank you, by the way. And thank you for holding. I'm thrilled to be here that we've got the camp. This is awesome. And I've been trying to promote it to get people to join in and say, hey, if you're trapped at home, join in online, super easy. And this has been one of the better, one of my favorite participations of a roundtable of industry professionals, some of the absolute best without a doubt. So, yeah, the irony is I proposed, hey, look, what's going to happen when, things hit the fan, and how do you be prepared for that, like a good Boy Scout? And so here we are now in this environment. It's like, I was going to have to show you some examples to get some buy-in on adopting some of these strategies. It is exactly what we're all now doing. So that's changed my presentation. And the fundamental thing that is, we're talking about, well, we've got to produce content, what do we say? Recognizing there's a production process behind that, and that is where the issues show up. And then realizing, okay, I've got to decide what to say, and how many people are going to have their hands on making that decision. I've been working with my wife in healthcare, and these have been 18-hour days, all of a sudden realizing what's happened to the system. So John, in your session just a minute ago, talking about no one on remote, I sincerely recommend from time to time running a drill to go, okay, you're going to need to be on call, and what's going to happen, and then have fun. This is when you get to be a really good engineer and say, okay, let's break something. How well does it work with one arm tied behind your back? How well does it work when half the people who are supposed to be in the process aren't there, and the decision maker, and start testing the system with some pressure. And I'm going to talk some more about that tomorrow, because once you put pressure on a system, that's when the leaks will show up, and routinely doing that is a big help. So keeping in mind for these times, it's not the first domino that falls, it's the second and the third, and you go, oh, that's what's going to really jam up the system. And example after example, time after time, in every historic situation. When you look at the market crash in 2008, it wasn't the Wall Street investment banks that crashed, it was the reinsurance that was going to hit that couldn't be avoided. That was the tidal wave. It wasn't Fukushima, it wasn't that the plant went down, it was that the tidal wave literally cut their power and they couldn't keep water flowing. So think of it as a system, and what's the next domino and the next domino to help get ahead, because your strategies are going to have two simple parts. There's a proactive part, and then there's the reactive part. Exactly like you were saying, John, it's everyone has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. So you got to get ready to take that punch, and what's going to happen. And I've used one of my other favorite quotes is, you will not rise to the level of your expectations, but you will fail to the level of your training. What are we training for? And this is it. So this is going to be a great example of what to put in your hurricane survival kit. And I say that as someone who was at ground zero for Hurricane Katrina, which is why I like to pass these lessons along. Thank you.
Great, thank you, James. And Chaz, we skipped over you because it looked like you were on the phone, and we're going to come back to you if you want to jump in here.
Okay, thank you. Yes, okay, so just to identify, I am webmaster at the San Francisco Municipal Transportation Agency. We handle public transportation, taxis, streets, and any kind of transportation in San Francisco. And of course, we put up a banner right away on the entire website to our COVID-19 response page. And then there are other supporting pages which give more details, say for service changes or for what's happening for our services to taxi drivers. And one of the things we started running into was if we have our own focus, how do we title pages appropriately so that when the results come up in Google, people can get to the right page? So we had some work around that. And the other part is that doesn't stop our budget process, which requires public outreach. And how do we support the public outreach to ensure that citizens still have input on our budget process and can participate from home? So we ran into some glitches with that, and we've got more meetings coming up, and we're hopefully learning from the initial glitches. It's just that like the world doesn't stop because of COVID-19. So how do we ensure that our customers are supported? So that's what we're wrestling with.
I think that's actually a great segue into our next question that we wanted to pose to the group was, what do you see in the future? Like what needs do you see that you're predicting or planning for, or your users have asked for? So just this morning, someone from an institute reached out about bandwidth issues, and I realized I'm totally unprepared. That I did not know anything about our bandwidth. Luckily, John was there to help answer that question, but it seems that like a lot of our departments are thinking about live streaming events, and they're worried about their websites being able to handle that. And so I'm curious as to what do we see else in the future?
I think Nikki has her hand raised.
Yeah, hi, I'm Nikki Katz from Oregon Health and Science University, and we have a hospital and researchers and a medical school and just a ton of different things going on. And I think right now our problem isn't technical, it's more a vague issue of information overload. We have just so much news coming out and it's constantly changing. We have 2 separate websites we spun up. We've got our public-facing COVID site for our patients and our internal intranet site for our employees and our students. And both sites have just so much information, just a ton of FAQs and accordions with expandable info. It's just too much. And just trying to figure out how much to present to people so they're just not scrolling and scrolling and scrolling and just trying to decide how much to look at until they just get overwhelmed. Just how to decide what information to give them and how to decide when to send them off to look at something else versus how much to present in the initial view of a page.
You are not alone. I think that is really the key of one of these things too, and thinking about how that plays out sort of over a very long period of time too, because I feel like the depth of the information is going to get greater and more nuanced. So I think that's really one of the challenges I think we're probably presented with here. In addition to the fact that I think we have to be sensitive to all of our users actually are getting information overload, not just from us, but kind of from everywhere else as well.
Yeah, I want to plus one that. Dina and David and I have been working really closely with university communications and University IT and VPTL about all of that flood of information we're pushing out at Stanford. It's only been 3 weeks and it's already an overwhelming amount of content spread across a number of sites, which means that suddenly the search experience is falling apart. The content is not indexed properly at Google. To Chaz's point of a few moments ago, even the information that's on a single site, maybe that site wasn't architected in a way that does searching and filtering in a particularly usable way. So you're going back through dates looking for information, or if you're on the health alert site and you search for vaccine, you might get a search result that's about SARS and Zika, because that's what that site was used for prior to COVID-19. And we're being asked to help construct a solution that's for the next 12 to 18 months, because that's how long we're expecting to be in this sort of intensity of communication needs and getting through it. And that's just our best guess. So there's definitely a time where you need to transition to a coordinated communications approach, where these websites are not seen as single entities owned by their organizations, but they're instead seen as a coordinated ecosystem through which those organizations are intentionally working together to design and serve content to the same audience. And that is a mind shift for most of these organizations, but it's one that probably is overdue in a university environment. I'm sorry, James, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, when you talk about search and flooding results and no longer getting, we have a particular weakness here in California. People are wondering, as you see some of the news, like, I'm scared to the hospital because am I going to get coverage? If you search medical and medi-cal, search engines don't know the difference. Major, just computer oops. And in California, it's a major weakness. And I can absolutely tell you that the uncertainty is the major stress for your audience, whether you're the university or the hospital or you're the public transportation system. And it's what information is the right information. For years, I have struggled to be able to tell people who ask me, what was it like after Katrina? This is what it was like, with the exception of there was no media. It was word of mouth. And your ability to plan was about a 2-hour in advance. And last week, as we got the information coming in and the quarantines were coming in, I'm watching the messaging going through the hospital and the healthcare systems. It was being updated within every few hours. What was happening federally, what was happening at the state, what was happening at the city, updated every few hours. So the uncertainty of information, which means as you manage your message and you're talking about, are we flooding people? You absolutely need to step up to a coordinated strategy. This is where you go from the level of a project management to program management, and it's analogous to an interactive bug. It's no longer unit testing, it's regression testing and going, wait a minute, when I put all this code together, this guy and this guy are asking to use and planning to use the same resource at the same time. And I didn't realize that when I unit tested this and I unit tested this, both were fine. Put them together, now I've got a problem. So you have to back up and go, is the message clear? I took a picture down the street of an example, a business put up a sign that says we're closed, and reading the sign, it's like, did you close forever or just for a few days? Because the language was slightly ambiguous, and it adds to an environment of uncertainty and adds to the stress. So in thinking of the content and thinking of the messaging, the more you can simplify it and push back and help to show the bullet wound, and people who show up who are the technical people, the medical people who say, it's this, this, and this. And like, that's a lot of 14, 15 letter words. And I've got to reduce this to a 6th grade vocabulary. What to do, make it very simple, make it very, very clear. So at a glance. So I'm not making the problem worse by adding noise. Yeah, as soon as you can, get a coordinated strategy across all of your social media, across all of your channels. If you have a single if you're a university and you have 250 channels to your audiences, coordinate those as fast as you can. It really helps. And this is exactly the thing I'm talking about. When you pressure test a system, this is that test. And you're saying, oh, wow, didn't think of that and that and that. And you'll see where things show up. And it's great as an engineer to go, this is an obvious fix. This is stronger than that. But taking it to the decision makers, they were going to make an emotionally based decision, not a value-based decision, and not necessarily an engineering-based decision. And you're selling an idea. And sales are often emotionally based. That's when it's really helpful to remember a technique called show the bullet wound. Oh man, have you seen that? That looks really bad. So just like John was saying earlier, don't let a crisis go to waste. So that helps learn the retrospective to build trust. But at the same time, just like Pearl Harbor, when Nimitz came in, you had to shake the hand of the guy and said, you tried to tell us this was going to happen and no one listened to you. Your job from now on is make sure I always listen to you.
I saw that Robert Darman's hand was raised. Would you like to speak?
Yeah. So I'm Robert Diarmond. I work for the public arts on campus at Stanford. And so one of the big issues that we've been grappling with is how much do we design for this? We have, you go on our calendar pages and it's a graveyard. We're not doing what we're supposed to do. We don't have our museums open. We don't have concerts at the Bing Concert Hall. We don't have concerts at Frost. And so the arts is really trying to step up and doing this coordinated offensive where we're creating content that you can view from home and then trying to consolidate it as much as possible. But still we have this question of like, what do we do about our calendar page? Do we just remove it for right now? Do we try to redesign it so that all of these canceled events don't appear? I mean, that information still needs to get out there that there are canceled events, but that's one of our main struggles. The other struggle is that we don't know how long this is going to go on for. Right now, we're canceling everything to May 15th because that's the date the university is put out there. But that's unlikely that, suddenly we're going to be able to have 8,000 people in Frost 2 days later. That's not going to happen. But of course, our director doesn't want to cancel an 8,000 person Frost event unless he kind of has to. So those are some of the issues that we're dealing with being publicly facing, events-based organizations. And yeah, totally agree with the coordinated effort, trying to make sites where we don't just do something for one little specific purpose, but try to collaborate and bring in all of the different offerings that are available to people.
Robert, oh my gosh, that's an incredible point. I never even thought about how the whole purpose of something like cancer is so much in person. And so your digital presence is really secondary to your in-person presence. What happens when that flips and you didn't see it coming? Because why would you? This has no precedent. I mean, that seems like a really interesting opportunity to sweep the decks and think about what does a virtual museum site look like and build a different site.
So
I know it's not your decision, but there's an interesting opportunity there to really sweep the decks and do something unique.
And probably everyone is having a similar experience where just everyone is coming up with these ideas of new websites and new programs to put online, because right now almost all of our staff aren't doing anything else but thinking about how to put things online. And it's suddenly kind of intense when I'm the only tech person in an organization of 120 and like I can't do all of this. Yeah, it's just intense. And I don't know if JB's on this call, but she did me the great pleasure of making me the backup for health alerts in stanford.edu as well. So suddenly I am even more in demand, which was, really fun to tell my staff, like, hey, you're the lesser priority now, but still they're coming up with these cool ideas. I want to figure out how to do it.
Yeah, when we think about disruption, a week or two ago, our transportation department sent a note out and said, cancel your parking permits. So, thank you for reminding us, since we can't go on campus and use those, but that also has a big organizational impact on them and their revenue stream and their budgets. So it'll be interesting to see how, some of these financial ramifications, bad word, sorry about that, but the impacts from a financial standpoint start affecting stuff. And, Robert, you alluded to that, obviously, when you have a 8,000 seat theater that suddenly is empty.
I do think there are some cool opportunities, though. I feel like the first wave of this was alerts, and then the second wave was exactly what you were describing, Robert, which was like, oh my goodness, I have this homepage that was really event centric, or maybe even like room and space scheduling centric, like that kind of like, I was talking with Office of Religious Life earlier this week, and like booking a wedding at Memorial Church is not the primary function of their website any longer, right? That used to be a really, really core feature. And suddenly, there's sort of the need to sweep some of that aside and yet still communicate to that audience of like, did you have a wedding booked at Memorial Church? That audience also needs to be reached. So I think it's an interesting opportunity to, try and figure out what happens when those things flip.
I am noticing that Sarah Seastone is not only tearing up, but also has her hand raised in Zoom. But I did want to point out, Robert, that we also are partners with University Communications to back up. We're the team on health alerts and the homepage and all of those properties that University Communications runs. So we got your back. Sarah Seastone.
Yeah, it's a good segue. I was just, I think we're all sort of feeling that emergency response and realizing who has access to do what on your website, and like who can actually build a banner and who can publish it and in which web properties. And I don't think it was a unique experience that we had sort of one or two people who could really do that and spin it up well and do it fast, and they were in their car when the banner needed to come up because the announcement had just come out from the, and sort of that. So a bit of, I think what we're also doing is recognizing structurally where we have some real problems in our staffing and in who can do what and in who's trained to do what, and where the documentation really sits, and where we can pull documentation from previous things, like maybe we closed for the wildfire, smoke, or maybe we did this other thing. And so how do we document COVID-19 so that we can reuse or utilize? So it's just been an interesting process, I think, to make sure that we're staffed well and that we're documented well, and that we've got backups after backups after backups in both of those spheres.
And I cannot virtually raise my hand because I'm a co-host, but I'll jump in here. I agree, and it's tough. We're being asked for all of these communication needs, and then you look at what the actual just real life needs are for keeping people healthy and keeping people safe and keeping people employed if you can. And so yes, there is a strain on everyone, and we definitely want to recognize that. So
I also did want to say, which I had forgotten in that point, of also like how to capture the good ideas that are coming from the people who don't have any relationship right now to sort of the web team or the web, but and they are sort of engaging with their web pages in ways that they haven't for years, and they're rethinking them, and they want to do shiny new things and they want to change it all right now. But and some of that you prioritize because it makes sense in this moment. Some of that has to be tabled, and how do you figure out like how you're keeping that all together, so that you can do the shiny fancy things sometimes.
And what's also happening is that some teams find themselves with a lot of free time and they're updating documentation and they're working on websites and when they previously were doing their normal day to day. And so then they're leaning on web teams and they're like, hey, I need help with this. Rachel Hupp, I believe that you had your hand raised and now I don't see it anymore. Did you want to?
No, I think I was just, clapping and giving ups and general positive feedback, not super relevant.
That is relevant.
On that last point, I'm definitely at home. We've definitely been doing some purging and some things like that. So the same as we mentioned earlier, people are starting to show up with their with questions about their site. They're looking at their site. That's an opportunity, and also it could be a condition of what people are able to work on and where they can focus their time in this new kind of environment.
Well, I think we're getting close to the end of our time here. Does anyone have any other additional thoughts? Probably have time for.
I do have a question this time.
Okay.
So I'm just wondering if, in you guys' expertise, you think that we're going to go back to the way things used to be, or whether this is just going to change everything going forward. I know it's a very broad question, but especially in terms of communication and messaging in you guys' areas, do you think that this is going to change things permanently, or we're going to go back the way it was before?
Well, I can share that as the product owner for the platform that my team supports, I'm absolutely going to be and have already put in stories for us to consider and prioritize that have to do with a little bit more of a defensive posture in communications. We should have had a built-in alert. We're in earthquake country. We should have had a way to pull in content from other sites. Maybe we should prioritize some things that are about basic communication needs in a time of an emergency over things that are mainly display feature richness. I'm not saying we made the wrong choices at the time, but I am thinking about how this might shift my product choices going forward. And I do think like some of our clients might ask for things that are about and I did, in fact, have a very fancy client this week asking me for something that was launch a site by Friday that's beautiful and rich and engaging. And I just wanted to like smack him in the face and just be like, this is, the optics of that are so wrong right now. You want to put out sites that are informational and you want to put out things that are usable and you want to solve the problems people are having. Nobody is looking for beautiful pictures right now.
Right.
Those times will come back. So I think this is going to shift things for the long run, personally. Anybody else?
I can jump in. If I can jump in, am I on? It looks like I'm on. Yeah, I do hope this will change things operationally for everyone. And I hope this is a great opportunity because, yeah, I actually already made the slide from the Mike Tyson quote. Yeah, everybody has a plan to get punch in the mouth with Mike Tyson, and the proactive stuff you do is the training you did before you got in the ring with Mike Tyson, and the reactive stuff is what you do after he punches you in the mouth. We're all doing reactive right now, but a great thing to do is be ready for that next retrospective. Grab the lessons of today to do the planning for tomorrow, because it's much easier to sell that bullet wound right now and get the buy-in and get the budget and say, let's set up for the better communication plan and understand that, and the better priorities and the better networking. Someone mentioned the question about silos. Silos are always a huge problem, and they cannot in a large organization because it's just necessary for efficiency. But if you remember looking at the Hurricane Katrina events and asking yourself, what's going on? Why can't they solve this problem? It was a silos problem. And if you look on the research and the reporting, the retrospectives, Mike Brown from FEMA And when at the time, he was my most hated person because I kept hearing the information, help is coming, and it didn't come. I can't tell you how angry we were on the ground. Later, we found out that the communication process got siloed. It went uphill and didn't come back downhill. They eventually found resources staged in place that had been sitting there for 3 days, waiting to be told where to go. Silo problems are huge. So everything you can do to find out where the water on the concrete found the cracks today, write it down for the retrospective to present to the leadership and say, this is what we learned when we got punched in the mouth. Can we be more proactive in the future and do better training? Now's the time to grab those lessons.
Yeah, +1 to breaking down the silos. Some things I've seen that are working to bring it back from the violent imagery that we accidentally introduced by talking about smacking people in the face. We've there's for the Stanford community, we have communities that practice Slack channels. If anyone on the call today has not joined that, I've seen a lot of really great sharing, and we absolutely should be sharing more there. So if anyone ever is like, hey, I need an alert, I need some code to do this, just ask, somebody will contribute. And on the Drupal.org workspaces, I've seen it, particularly higher ed groups are really doing a great job of sharing. Our Teach Anywhere site did not start at Stanford. We got all of that original content from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, I think. And they shared it with permission, and then we shared ours with permission to lots of other universities. So there's ways to break down the silos, and Slack is an incredible tool in our toolkit for doing that.
This is ironically an interesting opportunity to break down silos. The research has shown that if you try to take an organization and give them a project or an assignment of, y'all should meet and be more friendly, and this will break down silos, it does not work as well as having a shared problem. Once you have been someone who has struggled together, you get a cross-functional team, which is exactly what you're going to have now. You're going to have a shared problem. You're going to have a shared experience. That creates a bond that will last longer than having an assignment of learning to work with another department. So this is a great opportunity, every chance you have right now, to link your team to someone you don't normally work with, follow up with them later, and maintain those relationships. They will be very valuable going forward.
So I'd like to be mindful of time since the session is scheduled to end 3 minutes ago. And so I wanted to thank you so much for all of the thoughtful feedback and comments that you're making, and to stay healthy and sane during these times. So thank you so much, and have a good lunch.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks for all
Thank you.
great discussion.